Hello, today we are going to be using our story map that we have started to innovate to write our own new version of the story of Elmer. So you will remember that I have innovated my map and renamed my story Elvis, which is all about a different elephant. Looks a little bit different to Elmer, and it's slightly different in terms of what happens in my story. I have kept quite a lot of things the same because that is going to help me keep the structure of my story making sense, and it's still quite similar. It's an innovation, it's not a creation story. I'm not writing an entirely new story. I am just innovating to make some of the ideas my own. So I'm going to show you how to use your map to write your story up. Now, we're going to do this over 2 sessions this week. So in the session today, we are going to look first at the beginning of the story. So I've already written my beginning part here, and I'm going to read it to you in a moment. I'm going to write beginning just to remind us of the sections in our story. Okay, so I can find my beginning on my map. I'm actually going to put a little circle around it just to mark where, do a lasso around here. This is the beginning part of my story. So you can see where it ends saying that he loved a joke. That's the end of my beginning part. So I'm going to read it to you now and pick out some of those important things that I have included. Elvis. There was once a herd of elephants. Some were gigantic, some were fat, some were tiny, but all of them were grey, except one. Elvis was different. He was a stripy, joyful elephant that always loved a joke. Now you will notice that in this beginning part of my story, I have got some sentences that are long and some sentences that are really short. Now it's important in your story to use a mixture of both of them. You don't want just to have lots and lots and lots of really long, complicated sentences, because then it makes it hard for the person who is listening to your story or reading your story to understand. But I have started with a long sentence. My second sentence is probably my longest one. It starts, some were gigantic. So this is a very descriptive sentence. It helps to paint a picture in the person who is listening to the story's mind. So I've used some different adjectives here. Some were gigantic, and then I have included a comma because I've got a bit of a list of adjectives coming here. Some were fat, and I need my next comma, and some were tiny. Okay, can you see I haven't actually used a conjunction yet? That is a list of 3 in my sentence. Some were gigantic, some were fat, and some were tiny. I've used 3 adjectives there to describe the different elephants in the herd. And then, before finishing my sentence, I have used the conjunction but. But all of them were grey except one. Okay, so you can see that is quite a long sentence. Let's see how many words it's got in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 words in that sentence, but it tells me quite a lot of information. The interesting thing is then how we've used a really short sentence afterwards, because that helps create more of a story effect to our writing. Elvis was different. There's only 3 words in that sentence, and that's okay because it helps to create the effect in our story. He was a stripy, joyful. So because again I've got 2 adjectives there to describe, I've put a comma in the middle. elephant that always loved a joke. Okay, so I've used quite a lot of descriptive language there in the beginning part of the story, and all of my sentences are starting in a different way. There once was, some were, he was. Okay, they're not really not really amazing sentence starters, but they all start in a different way. You could start your story in a different way to the way that I've started mine. I might change it to use once upon a time. So that's the beginning part of the story. You might choose to write your beginning part, then have a little rest, and then go back to write the next part. So the next part of our story is going to be called the build-up. Okay, so the next section is the build-up. And I can again do a lasso around where my build-up is my next section. Make sure I'm getting the right part. Okay. Now my next line of pictures actually. Here is my build-up. Okay, so it'll be the same on your map, going up to when he's going through the jungle. It's going to be the build-up. No action happened yet. So again, I'm going to read it to you first. However, one night he lay on the green grassland and felt miserable because everyone laughed at him. Early the next morning, Elvis silently slipped away and plodded through the jungle. Now, let's have a look more closely at my build-up section. So, I've started with the word however, which is exactly the same as the original story. I quite liked how that bit started. You might change it to use a different word. However, one night he lay on the green grasslands. So here I've got two words that start with a g. That's sometimes used in stories again. It's called alliteration, where you're using the same sound at the beginning of each word there. So you could change the word green, but maybe think of something else that has the same g sound as well. So, however, one night he lay on the green grasslands and felt miserable because, which again helps us to include more detail. Why is he miserable? Because everyone laughed at him. This is a nice story sentence opener we've got here. Early the next morning, so that helps us move the time on in our story and helps the person who's reading it understand again the order of the things that are happening in your story by using the next morning in there. Early the next morning, Elvis silently slipped away. So we've got an adverb here. He silently slipped away. But again, they've both got the sound at the beginning. So they sound quite nice together. Silently slipped away. You could say silently slunk away. Two words together. Elvis silently slipped away and plodded, that's a lovely word to use, through the jungle. Plodded does remind me of an elephant word because they're so heavy and they plod. I wouldn't say that he silently skipped through the jungle because an elephant, I don't think, could silently skip through a jungle because they are very, very large. Okay, right, the next part of our story that we are going to be writing is the action in our story. So I'm going to, again, on my story map, do a lasso around the action part of my story. And that's where something's going to happen to your elephant. He decides on the trick that he is going to play. So here it is in the middle section. And this is going to be the last part of the story that you're going to write today, if you would like to, because then we're going to write the rest of the story later in the week, because it can get quite long. So, here we go. Action. Here's the action part in my story. So again, I'm going to look at my map. I haven't written this part already. I'm going to write it with you. I've changed the sentence opener here from eventually to before long. Now, remember, we always make sure that our capital letters stand out and they're nice and big. I've seen lots of you practicing that at home. So, before long, he came across a large glue leaf tree. Now that is a tree that I have completely made up. It does not exist. Covered in sticky leaves. Okay, so he's seen something else that is going to make him want to play a trick. He shook the tree what was I writing? He shook the tree. So here I am. He shook the tree so hard that all the leaves fell off. Okay, that's the end of my first sentence. You can see already that is all action. That's all things that Elvis is doing. So before long, he came across a large, get my red pen. Before long, so again, that's another time connected word there that we've used to start connect another sentence on. Before long, he came across a large glue leaf tree covered in sticky leaves. He shook the tree so hard that all the leaves fell off or fell to the ground. I think I preferred fell to the ground, but I can change that again, can't I? Let's see, where were we up to next? Sneakily, he rolled all over the leaves. So that's where I changed the word from mischievously to sneakily. Sneakily, he rolled all over the leaves. So sneakily, he rolled all over the leaves. Full stop. When Elvis stood up, he looked like any other glue leaf tree. So here we go. When Elvis stood up, he looked like any other glue leaf tree. I crossed him out. I forgot to sticker over him there, so I've just done it as I went along. When Elvis stood up, I was hoping you can still see this. A bit low down. Glue leaf So, before long, he came across a large blue leaf tree covered in sticky leaves. He shook the tree so hard that all the leaves fell off. Sneakily, I thought sneakily was a good word to use because he is doing it in secret, doesn't want anyone else to know. Sneakily, he rolled all over the leaves. When Elmer stood up, he looked like any other glue leaf tree. So he is now completely camouflaged. Nobody will spot that it is him. Now you can also notice that in this section, in your action part of your story, there's not quite so much story sentence starters and there's not quite so many descriptive words in there because we're not describing any characters and we're not describing any of the setting. We are just talking about the action that is happening. So you can still make interesting word choices, of course, because that's going to make your story much more interesting, but there might not be quite as much in this part of your story. So that's the part you're going to do today, all the way up to the end of action. So we've got beginning, build up, action, and then in the next part of the story, we're going to have our resolution and our ending. So it's going to be written in 5 parts, this story, not just a beginning and a middle and an end, which we have done before. We're going to have a go at doing 5 parts of our story. But that does help you to break it down and have a go at writing a little bit at a time. If you don't get all the way down to the end of the action finish today, then that's okay. You might want to do a little bit more at different times throughout the week, as we would normally do when we are at school. Okay, good luck, and I'm looking forward to seeing lots of your fantastic Elmer innovations.